Hi there, thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to give my thoughts on SeedInvest, which is a platform where you can invest small portions of money into startups. SeedInvest aims to make the world of venture capital and angel investing more accessible. Essentially, that means that you would be investing in companies that are smaller but are at the top of their growth, and hopefully their revenues and their profits will multiply exponentially in the future. So before I talk about SeedInvest as a platform, I want to talk a little bit about angel investing as a whole. Angel investing, or venture capital in general, is basically giving money to startups or other businesses that are in their early stages or requiring private funding in order to fund their operations and grow further. This is different than other types of investments in two ways. First, the only way to cash out your money is actually through either an acquisition or because that business has become listed in a public market. This usually doesn't happen until many years after you've invested in that given business, and that means that the time horizon for these specific investments is pretty long. The other thing is that startup investment is inherently very risky. You're investing in companies that oftentimes don't have that many sales or haven't been around for that many years. They may have really good ideas, but that doesn't mean that the ideas may necessarily succeed. Many startups fail, and that's okay, but that is a risk you have to be willing to take before you invest in one of those. On the flip side, if you happen to catch a startup seeking funding at the right time and that startup manages to survive and become profitable and grow even more, well, you are looking at a huge return on your money. Just imagine being one of those people who was able to give some venture capital to Uber when they were needing some money to grow further and expand their operations. Your return on investment is really, really massive and bigger than you would see in most situations in any other kind of investing. But of course, there's only one Uber, and there's many companies out there that either have lower valuations than Uber despite making it and surviving, or don't make it at all. So it is a very different kind of game, and it is one that requires a lot of research, a lot of, honestly, luck, and it requires a very specific time horizon. You may not be able to cash out for years. Traditionally, when these startups or early stage or private firms are looking for extra funding, generally they're going to companies or maybe big, rich private investors and asking them for money, for advice in exchange for some equity, or that is a part of the company. SeedInvest is changing this model. This means that companies that list through SeedInvest are actually seeking funding from the public instead of a few giant investors. This changes things in two ways. First of all, instead of having a few shareholders of your company, you actually have a lot more who have smaller investments or smaller portions of equity. The other one is that in the side of the investor, well, usually the investment minimums for venture capital and angel investing are pretty big. People are asking for tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands, maybe even the low millions. In SeedInvest, the investment minimums are much lower. Usually startups here are asking for a minimum of $500, usually $1,000, maybe sometimes $2,000. This means that without committing much money, you can own a small part of a growing business. If you're seeking alternative investment methods, this could be a way to get your hands into some of these that aren't necessarily correlated with the general market or a general industry. Now I'm going to talk about a point that I've seen made a few times regarding any sort of crowdfunding site for startups. It essentially goes that the best startups will already be invested in by those people and institutions with a lot of money who already have those contacts and those networks that will bring the best startup companies to them. I actually believe this is an incredibly valid point. It is likely that a lot of the best startups will never list on SeedInvest simply because they don't need to. They don't need to go to crowdfunding in order to receive the funding they require. That being said, with the rise of websites such as Kickstarter and Indiegogo, we've seen how crowdfunding has become a legitimate way to do business. And maybe we are seeing a change of paradigm when it comes to funding startups and early stage companies as well. So some would argue that that means that the companies that at the end of the day are offered on SeedInvest aren't necessarily the best companies out there. Though then again, SeedInvest says that about 1% of the companies that apply to be crowdfunded through SeedInvest actually get approved for this. This hopefully means that the companies that are being offered to the investors such as you and me are actually the best of the best, or the best of the best available to SeedInvest or among certain criteria. Does this mean that these are the best startups out there? Not necessarily, but it does mean that SeedInvest is putting some work into filtering out some really bad startups that are seeking crowdfunding because they can't get any other money. And once again, we may be experiencing the early stages of a change of paradigm when it comes to funding startups. We won't know until later. Now let's talk about SeedInvest itself. At any time, SeedInvest is offering a repertoire of startups where you can go in, look at them, and decide if you want to invest with them. Immediately, something that I think is a pro about SeedInvest is the overview pages. You're getting a lot of really useful and genuine information of the startups through these overview pages. You're seeing the investment minimums, you're seeing the management teams, any big investors that those companies have. You have a discussion section where people can ask questions and get the answers through there. You also have a data room where you see all the forums, all the financial statements, all the projections that these startups have chosen to file and to share. This is a great place to start if you want to do your due diligence and research when it comes to investing in a startup. There's also an excellent disclaimers page that talks about the disclaimers and the risks associated with both investing in that specific company that you're looking at and with startup investing in general. I like this a lot. You need to be aware of the risks that are associated to investing in startups and investing in certain companies in certain sectors before you actually invest. SeedInvest makes it very clear what the risks are, and a lot of these companies also make it very clear that maybe the sectors, the businesses, the competition they have are incredibly tough and may mean that they may not succeed in the future. As I've said before, there really are no guarantees with venture capital. This doesn't mean, however, that all the research you need to do lies just in SeedInvest. You should research about these companies outside of SeedInvest though to get an idea of what they look like, of how their business operates, what other people are saying about them before you invest. The data room and the discussions and the risk and disclaimers are not enough to invest in a company. Another thing I really like is that SeedInvest offers companies at different stages of growth. You may have a company at their seed stage, which is essentially a company looking for their very first round of public funding. However, I've seen other companies that have survived multiple stages of funding and have operated for multiple years, and they're seeking extra funding through SeedInvest, as well as returning companies that did a successful round in SeedInvest a couple years ago and are going for an extra round now. This means that you can balance the risk a little bit. If you invest in a company that is in its very first stage of funding and in a very early stage, well, you're going to get more of a piece of the pie and potentially greater returns. But then again, it's a way riskier business because there's less proof that it can survive. However, if you're attracted to this kind of investing and you want a more stable company, well, you can find some companies there that have survived for multiple years and have shown that they have what it takes to be there and be in the business. There's also an auto invest option where you can put at least $2,000 in it and it'll distribute that money you've put in through 10 different startups. If you want to diversify all your investments and put startups as a part of your portfolio, this could be an option to consider. And I like that they offer this because I don't see many other crowdfunding websites or competitors offer this specific auto invest option. If you want a much less hands-on approach, then this could be the way to go, although it's not personally what I've done before. Something that's neither a pro nor a con, but simply as important to mention, is that the investment minimums are actually high compared to other websites where you can fund startups. SeedInvest claims that the investment minimum is $100, but usually the minimum I've ever seen is $500, and usually it's $1,000, sometimes $2,000. This is not a lot in the grand scheme of angel investing. However, there are some other websites and platforms that will actually allow you to invest $100 at minimum. But there are some other websites and platforms that allow you to invest $100 or $250 as a minimum. I like low investment minimums because then you can really manage your risk and only put forward what you're willing to completely lose. Now let's talk about things that I personally haven't liked about SeedInvest. The first one is that they actually charge a 2% fee on any investment you do. That means if you invest $500, there's a $10 fee associated to it, or if you invest $1,000, there's a $20 fee associated to it. That to me is a lot, especially considering the fact that other competitors and platforms don't charge any fee at all, at least for the investors. Given that we're living in a world that is moving towards fee-free platforms, it would make it so much easier to recommend SeedInvest if they didn't have that 2% fee, but that sort of just kills me. I love my platforms without any fees for investors. There's also the fact that because of this system where they vet and only approve 1% of the companies that apply through SeedInvest, sometimes there's just not that many companies to pick from. I've seen as few as 5 companies available at the same time in SeedInvest, and honestly, this is not a lot, especially given the fact that I at least need to have a lot of conviction before I put my money into a startup. There's a lot of research involved, and honestly, for every 50 startups that people see, you may just invest in 1 or 2. So having 5 at a time means that you may invest in a startup once every couple of years if you really don't like what you're seeing. I've invested through some startups through SeedInvest before, and the experience of investing itself is fine besides that 2% fee I mentioned. I do like that you have a section in your profile where all the documents that these companies send, as for example, investor updates, updates and investor notes are stored. That way you have a trail of documentation that these companies are giving you. And I also like that they incentivize you having a diversified portfolio of startups, because the truth is, if you invest in 10 startups, only 1 or 2 may be successful, if any. I will also mention that I'm disappointed of the fact that SeedInvest mentions nowhere in their FAQ section whether or not they accept international investors. This is especially disappointing because all it takes is just a single question and answer in the FAQ section, and I highly incentivize every single investment company to do this. That being said, whether or not a startup will allow international investors is at their own discretion. So if you find a startup through SeedInvest that you really want to invest in, the best way to go about it is to ask in the discussion section whether or not they accept international investors. However, I wouldn't go in expecting them to accept international investors. So would I recommend SeedInvest as your platform of choice for investing in startups? Well, it's complicated. The thing is, as long as a platform is legitimate and operating legally, I think the startups you're investing in matter a lot more than the associated platform. If I find a company that I really like and I really want to support and I think will bring me gains in the future that are considerable and worth my time, then I think I'll just invest in it anyways, regardless of the platform, as long as the platform is legitimate. I feel like I would invest in certain platforms before I invest in SeedInvest if they have no associated fee to investing. But at the end of the day, if I have a lot of conviction in a certain company that I want to invest in and it is available only through SeedInvest, I will invest in it regardless. I will say, however, that I don't have a negative experience with SeedInvest. I think they've been a solid platform and I like what they're doing. I just wish there were sometimes more options and less fees associated to it. And I also wish they had clearer instructions on whether or not they accept international investors. And just a reminder that this review is not sponsored in any way by SeedInvest. I've had no contact with any SeedInvest representatives of any sort. I've just used them before and want to share my experience. And talking about investing, if you're interested in cryptocurrency currently and you're looking for a place where to hold it, well, I would highly recommend using BlockFi. I hold a lot of my cryptocurrency in BlockFi because they give me interest rates of 5%, 6%, or even more. The way it works is BlockFi gives people cryptocurrency-backed loans at very high interest rates, and they're rewarding you for holding your cryptocurrency with them with pretty high interest rates as well. If you're interested, you can sign up for BlockFi with the link below, and if you maintain a balance of $100 or more for a month, you will actually get rewarded with some Bitcoin. And this is on top of the interest rate you're already earning. So to me, it is an excellent deal. That is all I have for today. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more content like this, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe. And with that said, I'll see you on the next one.